Scott Horton.
Hey, Jeff.
You know, this is like an emergency broadcast of Eye on the Empire.
It kind of is.
You know, I mean, we just went through, I don't know, did you watch the debates? Did you see what's going on? Are you following this?
I saw much of it, yeah.
Okay, so you understand then exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, and I'm Jeffrey Tucker, Liberty.me. This is Scott Horton, antiwar.com, and we're doing our thing.
Yeah. Hey, I need to tweet this out. I'm behind the curve here, man.
Okay, and yeah, so we've got people behind me, waiting.
I see them.
So,
hey guys.
Yeah, I'm at a gathering, a party.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever done this before? You showed up at a party and said, "Good evening, everybody. Now I need a room because I'm going to do a show."
No, but I could understand.
Yeah, it happens all the time. But now let's talk about what's on everybody's minds, which is the incredible display the other night. I find myself a little bit shocked by the whole experience because I had forgotten just how unbearably superficial these so-called debates can really be. And
yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I mean, you know, I'm interested in economics. There's no economics questions beyond just dopey things like how are you going to create more jobs? You know, it's just a little bit silly.
Right.
And I found it unbearably dull, just how many questions were about foreign policy. You're a foreign policy analyst. You must have been more interested in that subject than I was. But even you must have been struck by the ridiculous superficiality of the questions and the answers.
Yeah, I mean, all they say is, "Oh, Hulk smash," you know. Just wait till ISIS gets a load of me, and then we just got to believe them that it's gonna be bloody, man, bloody, and the crowd goes wild, and that's basically it, you know. But certainly not substance. And you know, I have to say this, and you know, I have a grudge like this, and whatever. We could talk about that if you want. But the best anti-war line of the night belonged to Donald Trump, not to Rand Paul. And Donald Trump said, "I was against the Iraq war in 2003, unlike the rest of these clowns. And I predicted it would destabilize the entire Middle East. And you didn't listen to me. And look what happened." And they didn't boo him. I don't think he got a huge round of applause for it, but they sure didn't boo him for it. Everybody knows that's true. Even Republican rank and file have to concede that's true to a certain degree, especially if it's somebody like Trump who's saying it. And Rand, actually, that was his first question of the night. "So, Rand, you still stand by your previous statement that GOP policies have helped to, you know, lead to the rise of ISIS?" And not only did he back away from his previous statements and deny it, but he had the worst canned answer in the world about how only ISIS is responsible for ISIS. Only ISIS is responsible for their terrorism and brutality. And simultaneously, as he was saying it, the tweet went out. Right. So this was like his canned, you know, practiced response that he had.
Well,
when they give him a chance to go back in time and tell us how things could have been different, he had already decided he was definitely going to not take it. And he was going to say ISIS is ISIS's fault only. And then he goes, "Oh, well, and, you know, maybe we shouldn't be funding their allies in Syria so much." But even there, he kind of contradicted himself and wasn't really being clear because we're actually backing their enemies, some of their enemies in Syria, the Nusra Front, but their allies in a sense in their war against ISIS, against Assad and the Ba'athist government. But he didn't explain what he meant, that we're helping other groups just like ISIS in their joint project to overthrow the government in Damascus, something like that. And instead he said they're driving around in our Humvees. But we didn't give them the Humvees. We gave them Toyotas. They stole the Humvees. The Humvees are from when they invaded and sacked Mosul, and then a few months back when they sacked Ramadi and the Iraqi army fled. That's where they got the Humvees from, not from direct American foreign aid. So here he's backing off from the real argument. He gives his half-assed argument, and then he gets his facts all jumbled up and doesn't even make any sense. And later on, it's Trump who gets to say, "I was the one who was right about Iraq." You know, and in fact,
is it true that what Trump said about himself actually?
Yes. Yes, I read a quote. Remember, I told you last time we were joking about how Think Progress ran a thing that said, surprisingly, we agree with this fascist Trump on a lot of stuff, right?
Yes, right.
But one of those, it had a quote from him. I think that was where I read it. But the quote was really great too. He's like, oh my God, all these young men walking around with their faces blown off, with their arms blown off, their lives ruined forever, and all for nothing. And this is like a month after the fall of Baghdad. So, you know, he wasn't shy about it at all. He was straight F this horrible war. And he goes, our guys and their guys too. Think of all the Iraqis, all the pain that they're suffering. And like, it was great, man. You know, and I don't know much more about what he said. I mean, he also said horrible things about Iraq. Like, now that we've done this, they owe us for what we've done to them, and they better pay us all their oil and in tribute. You know, and this is how to defeat ISIS: is to take all their oil and starve all their people out. All this just.
But you know, I must say, I was, you know, and you've been much more negative on Rand than I ever have been. But I was frustrated by the sense that I had that he was constantly triangulating everything, you know, last night.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, you know, he's got to be the libertarian. That's the way that he distinguishes himself from the pack. And yet it's weird. It's like he knows that, but he recoils from it slightly. It's like he pulls back, you know? I mean, the whole debate was like hungry for somebody's philosophy. And we did get some philosophy.
See, I don't think he knows that. I want to stop you there on the Rand, and we can get back to the rest of the bastards in a second. But as far as Rand goes, I think he has it completely upside down, you know? And I understand why he's confused, and from the position that he's in as an actual U.S. senator running for president, it's pretty easy to see why he's surrounded by people who have it just as wrong as him. And so his misunderstanding is reinforced. But it goes back to the old saw that if only Ron Paul had been a warmonger, he would have done so much better. Geez, Ron, we just wish you wouldn't talk about foreign policy so much, said the right-wing warmongers who never would have supported him anyway, who weren't really libertarians anyway, who only like to pretend they care about balanced budgets and whatever. But they're just Republicans, man. They didn't really mean that. Anybody who was saying that about Ron was not really on board for the Ron Paul message. Meanwhile, his anti-war message is what made him go from House member from Texas to global superstar because of his bravery in telling the truth about the horrible foreign policy and bringing in all kinds of people who weren't even involved in politics before, who weren't even interested before, all kinds of young kids and all these things. So what Rand learned the lesson was, I got to quit being so, I got to not be so good on foreign policy. All the people with power attack him for being good on foreign policy. All the people in power attack his dad for being good on foreign policy. And they pretend, and it's their understanding, that that's his weakness, that everybody knows that America is an exceptional global empire and we have to force our will on everybody. And who's outside that consensus except a bunch of kooks and the American people who actually don't believe that anymore. And if Rand if he would understand that his best position is not defending the Mitch McConnell party establishment from the outsider Trump. Oh my God, look everybody, he said he won't pledge to run as a Republican. How disloyal to our grand old party. Instead of positioning himself like that, what he should have done was said, with the exception of Donald Trump, everyone else up here is for the Iraq war, which ruined everything in the following 6 ways and led to the rise of ISIS in the following ways. And they supported the war in Libya and the wars in Syria that have led to the current crisis, and positioned himself not as an ally of Trump, but on the outside with Trump. He's a person running against the government, against the establishment, supposedly. Instead, he's cast himself as the loyal party member, fending off the outsider who's trying to turn the party upside down. And I just heard Lou Rockwell and Tom Woods, and they were talking about how the Republican voters hate the Republican Party. They hate Mitch McConnell and John Boehner. They hate John McCain. That's why when Trump attacked John McCain, everyone's like, so? We like war heroes, but we don't like John McCain. Forget him. You said that last time we talked about that, about how he was Teflon on that remark just because of who McCain is. And so Rand is he's got it completely wrong that the more I'm like Mitch McConnell, the more I'll fit in, the more support I'll have, but that's not playing out. And what's instead happening is the more he's like Mitch McConnell, the less anybody who worships his dad even cares about what he has to say at all. And I'm like Charlie Brown in the football here, Jeff, where I've been, picking on him and trying in a hopefully sort of constructive way, trying to attack him from the libertarian side to get him to move our way on this stuff for years now. And I keep holding out for him to learn the lesson that I'm gonna have to just come out swinging and fight these guys and whoop them, and that's the only way. But he just can't seem to learn the lesson. And look at what a failure he was last night. I mean, he could have gone out there, he could have whooped them on Iran, he could have whooped them on every bit of foreign policy and established himself as a real outsider challenging the status quo instead of establishing himself as an insider.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of being an outsider. I mean,
in a very general sense for the TV audience, he was saying, look at me, I'm protecting the party from Donald Trump. Me and Rick Perry are saying that we don't need some outsider disturbing the order around here, right? Like that was his argument. How dare he not pledge allegiance to whoever gets the nomination eventually and that kind of thing. So he's positioning himself as one of them, not one of us. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, and Trump was truly the only outsider. But, this idea that Republican voters hate the Republicans, I think that's just bullshit. I mean, look at the nature of the questions last night. They were all about immigration, which is a code word for white supremacy. They were about
that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons the base hates the leadership, is because the leadership is squishy on immigration, and they're completely right-wing nuts on it. That's
that's what I'm saying. That the Republican rabble is interested in theocracy and white supremacy and authoritarian control. So I don't believe this line that somehow Republicans hate their leadership. They may hate them on foreign policy and the global empire. That's the least popular thing. But the Republicans represent a fascistic, theocratic, white supremacist, misogynistic, authoritarian control. And maybe that's not the majority, but it's a large enough element of the Republican Party that these guys have to suck up to it in every single debate. And that's what this is about. I mean, every question about abortion was like, oh, what are we going to do with the women in this country? They're running around wildly doing things we don't like. Maybe we should just put them in cages and shut them down. Every question about immigration was like, there's too many brown people coming in here. Don't they know that this is a white person's country? We got to shut this shit down. I mean, this is and even the question about, I mean, it was an incredible thing, Scott. The question was, does God speak to you personally, and what does he say?
Oh God, I didn't watch that part.
Okay,
man.
So instead of laughing and denouncing, the question, all of these guys acquiesced immediately, and they all just said, oh, well, God speaks to me all the time, and he says, I don't know what. I mean, like, I listen to this stuff and I'm like, what are people around the world saying about these clowns? I mean, this is a whole long line of misogynistic white supremacist theocrats who are longing for global war, and they want to rule us. I
agree with all that.
Idiots we have, and I don't believe for a second that they wouldn't be saying these things unless they believed that this is the way they get the nomination. Right?
Yeah. No. I agree with what you're saying. I think we have a little bit of a misunderstanding. I agree with you that the Republican rank and file oftentimes are much worse and much further to the right than the party leadership on a lot of this stuff. But I'm saying that's the discrepancy where, they call John McCain a rhino, even though John McCain to you and me is a fascist. To them, he's a liberal. Mitch McConnell is a liberal. And what they want is Ted Cruz or somebody who, denounces McConnell.
I know it.
Yeah. I mean, they're all senators. I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, but I just mean that, what does Trump have going for him right now? What does everybody like about him right now? He's not a senator or governor. He's an outsider, and he's coming in. He's denouncing the Republican Party for being too far to the left, and that they need to move to the right where he is, and the rank and file love that stuff. So all I'm saying is Rand needs to be appealing to that outsider of the GOP establishment point of view, only in good ways, not bad ones.
Well,
Like,
Rand needs to assert a philosophy. I mean, wouldn't it have been nice if somebody last night had said something other than we should be ruled by a theocratic dictator who wants to kill everybody and
yeah.
you know, and have a central plan with a strong man. I mean,
And he's the only one it could be.
right.
There's no one else up there.
If one person had said, you know what this country is about? It's about liberty. It's about your rights. It's about your property and your right to be left alone. And the government's taking that away from him, and that's why we're in such trouble, whether it's foreign policy or domestic policy or anything else.
Perfect.
If somebody had just said like something resembling the authentic and true fundamental philosophy that America actually represents,
right?
Which is that people should be left alone.
Right.
That would have been an awesome thing. I mean, I spent 2 hours watching this nonsense, and desperately hungry for somebody to say some slight bit of truth.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I mean, my whole frustration with Rand is just because of the blown opportunity here.
I know.
I mean, it's just
I get
what I can imagine him accomplishing if he would just be his dad, only younger and in the Senate. And, if he would just be that identity. It's sort of like when Bob Barr ran for got the Libertarian nomination after Ron dropped out in 2008.
Right.
Everybody was trying to tell him telepathically, like somehow, Bob, just pretend you're Ron for 2 months, okay? That's all we need. We don't need to hear what you think. Nobody likes you, Bob. But we need someone to help carry the libertarian type angle forward, since Ron had to drop out of the official Republican nominating process, that kind of thing. Well, it's the same thing with Rand. Like, dude, where you differ from your dad, you suck. Just forget it. Just go read his articles and pretend you're him, only with the added benefit that Ron actually is too much of a gentleman for real politics. That's why Ron went up there, gave speeches, wrote articles, and voted no, and he never wheeled and dealed. He never really even really tried to pass a bunch of bills to do a lot of things. He introduced a lot, but he never participated in that kind of politicking, because then he would have had to return favors and that kind of deal. So he just went up there to give speeches. Rand, on the other hand, he likes to fight. He's got very thin skin. He likes to fight, but he's on the wrong side of everything. Or many, many, many of the most important things. And so what good is he? If he would get up there and just be Ron and fight. And here's the thing about it. Ron is awesome on all this stuff. And so if TV goes, oh yeah, kooky old Uncle Ron in the attic or whatever, so what? If you read his articles and understand what he's telling you, and understand it, and then go out there and explain it to the cattle in the Republican auditorium, you win. Because it's right and it's obvious, it's simple, and these guys are clowns. They say they want to fight radical Islam. Well, they got us fighting for Iran in Iraq, for Al-Qaeda in Syria, for and against both in Yemen, and they've destroyed Libya. Doesn't even exist. There's not even such a place as Libya anymore. Just the space between Egypt and Algeria, for Christ's sake. And these guys have ruined everything they touch. Now they're trying to get us into a nuclear war with Russia, which is not the Soviet Union, and it's not a threat, but does have H-bombs like the old USSR did. I mean, he can't do that.
You want to talk about Russia? I mean, let's. I hope you heard what Trump said about Russia, right? I mean, it's
perfect. Yeah, his best remark in this whole campaign so far that I heard.
What did he say? I mean, maybe I'm confused.
If it's the same way. I don't know about the debate last night, but I've heard him say before, oh, Putin, look, I can deal with Putin, no problem. We'll get him on the telephone. We'll have a little heart-to-heart. We'll understand each other. There's a man I can do business with. That's what he said. And it wasn't oh, I'm so macho that I can put him in his place. It wasn't like that. It was, there's a man that me and him could sit down and have a drink and a discussion and be done.
I think what he said was that he would respect me as, here's what's weird about Trump, actually. I mean, the more I think about this, I mean, he imagines that the U.S. is a personal state, like in the old sense, like before the 16th century, sometime between, the ancient world and the rise of modernity, that the state embodies your temperament. Whoever the head of state is, that is what the state is, that it takes on the personality attitudes and characteristics of the person who's ruling things, and that's who Trump imagines that he is. So he said that Putin would respect him, and therefore he could, get, like he says about China and every other place, a good deal, out of foreign nations, which is a very strange, like a pre-modern understanding of what statecraft is.
Well, I guess the statement that I read, or I don't forget if I heard or read it now, but I don't think it was. I mean, I'm sure he said variations on the same thing, and we're talking about Donald Trump here, so I'm sure he made it very personal about his greatness on at least a couple of occasions. Right. But the thing that I read was recognizing the humanity of Vladimir Putin, and it was a statement outside of the prevailing TV narrative that everyone is supposed to bow down and worship, which is that this guy is the reincarnation of Hitler, and he's trying to recreate the Soviet Empire and occupy all of Eastern Europe, Russian aggression, and he was having none of that. He was going, come on, yeah, whatever. Yeah, and that to me itself is beneficial, just to hear anyone on that level of power and influence talk in a way where they don't care what the script says everybody's supposed to say about Russia, but just whatever they want to say about it. Well, the script right now is a complete lie, and that's the real point here. It's America that is the evil Soviet Union conquering the world. It's America that's integrating all of the former Warsaw Pact into NATO, and even marching directly right up to their border, doing military exercises now in the Baltic states within hundreds of yards of the Russian border. Trying to provoke a conflict here. It's not the Russians on the march, it's the Americans overthrowing governments friendly to them in the neighborhood and the rest of it.
Well, I don't know if you saw the polls after the debate, but it was pretty overwhelming. There was a poll, conducted by 5 or 6 different websites, about who won the debate, and overwhelmingly, I mean, it's like 44% said that Trump won. And the next highest one was 10%, and I forget now even who. I think it was actually not Kasich, who, by the way, had the only decent humanitarian comment all night during the debate. I don't know if you heard it. It was about gay marriage. It was beautiful and actually authentic, and unscripted and lovely and deeply touching. It was. You're gonna have to go through some of the other candidates. I don't remember. It was the guy from
Rubio and Cruz.
Yeah, it was Rubio came in second. Rubio was, I thought, just like as a personality, very impressive, actually.
Which is interesting. That's what I actually didn't see too much of Rubio. I have a real hard time paying attention to these guys, man. I'm reading at the same time.
I was tweeting it all night, so
yeah. I did see a lot of the reactions said people were really impressed with Rubio, which is funny to me because he's a drooling idiot. I mean, this is a guy who knows absolutely nothing at all and talks at he's very confident in his completely, ridiculous renditions of whatever it is he's talking about. But I mean, here's a guy that to me has never been anything but a clown. And I did see your article where you say, hey, he always dresses really nice. So maybe that has.
You think I'm biased by the suits?
Maybe it's you, and a lot of people are. And maybe he was well prepared for last night's debate. But he tried to confront John Kerry for all of Iran's help for ISIS. What are we going to do about that, John Kerry? And John Kerry's like, no, Marco Rubio. Iran is on the ground in Iraq fighting ISIS right now. They're the only ones fighting ISIS right now. Go and do your 6th grade homework, kid, and come back to me. Jesus Christ.
Tell me a little bit more about Jeb Bush, because I was actually. This is very strange because he's obviously the establishment and preposterous and all the rest of it. But into my own mind, I looked at this long line of freaks, basically. As I said, I mean, like if you dig just a little bit below what they were saying on the surface, what you've got is just a parade of theocratic white supremacists, military
conservatives.
Yeah, I mean,
they're horrible.
They're horrible. I mean, the idea of individual liberty does not occur to any of them. They're all central planners. And Jeb Bush stood out among everybody for seeming to be relatively sober actually. I mean, he seemed to have a kind of sturdiness of vision that was a little bit, in favor of basically the status quo, not to. I mean, it didn't seem like lusty for some wacko vision of the world. I mean,
Yeah, he's George W. Bush in 2000.
Yeah.
He's a compassionate conservative, a Republican in name only, as the conservatives call them, an old Rockefeller Republican, basically, a son of his father. He's a,
so his where is he on Iraq, on I mean, how would you assess his likelihood of going to war or pressing forward?
Oh yeah, well, no, yeah, I mean, we'll be at war the whole time under Jeb, because he's going to bring all the neocons back. I mean, the Republicans don't even have any expertise other than the neocons to be their, assistant secretary of defense or, assistant secretary of state, or all those positions are going to be full of the neocons, from AEI and from GINSA and WINEP and all the neoconservative think tanks. So, yeah, I mean, I'd expect nothing but a nightmare. I don't think he's given. I think maybe he did give a foreign policy speech, but it was just, it was very well known for being, poorly delivered, and it didn't have much substance to it.
Well, it's a little bit chilling to me because I don't, as you recall, George W. was elected in part because he seemed to be less aggressive, in terms of.
Well, now remember, and this is a funny quirk about those neocons too, right? You look at Bill Kristol, he doesn't seem like a hardcore right-wing extremist. In fact, he's the son of a communist, and he's, and he's surrounded by a bunch of, all his best friends are all former Democrats. Many of them are still Democrats. The only thing right-wing extremist supposedly on the spectrum about the neocons is the warfare policy. But when it comes to the regulatory state and the welfare state and all that, they're very status quo, very middle of the road,
Right.
Nixonians even, I guess, when it comes to that kind of stuff, rather than Reaganites, supposed Reaganites. Not that Reagan ever did anything to
but I
build
didn't
a
hear
welfare
a
state.
single candidate even come anywhere near reflecting that sort of Reaganite anti-government mentality.
Yeah, no. And so Jeb, I mean, the reason I say that he's the shoe-in is because, as you say, he's the establishment choice. And like, we got to be real frank here about the America that we live in too, where, this is not some democracy or representative republic or some kind of thing like that.
Right.
This is an evil empire run by an oligarchy. The three branches of government and all the marble buildings that they inhabit in Washington, D.C. and all that is basically just the ceremonial trappings on what is really a massive national security state that lives out in the suburbs and at the Pentagon across the river out at Langley, Virginia. And these are the guys who are, the real state. All this stuff, and in New York City on Wall Street, all this stuff is basically just the pageant. This is the theatrics. So when it comes to deciding who's going to actually hold the power at the end of the day, it's up to the people who come to the consensus of who they're going to bankroll, who they're going to make sure wins. And I don't think there's enough different billionaires of enough different opinions about that in this country to have a real fight. I mean, maybe if Adelson decides he just totally disagrees about Jeb Bush somehow, personally slighted or something, maybe you could have a real fight between the Israeli fifth column and older parts of the establishment. But right now, it just seems to me like, the Wall Street banks and insurance companies, the arms dealers, the Israelis, the agribusiness firms, the pill pushers, all of them are very happy with Jeb. The only grassroots lobbies that have really any numbers and membership that matter at all on the right are the gun lobby and the AARP, and they're probably, more or less happy with him. They don't have anything to really object to. It's not like Jeb Bush is going to pass a bunch of gun control laws. W let the assault weapons ban expire and didn't do anything about it, so they don't really have anything to object to. And then there really is no other grassroots real kind of anything on the right. I mean, they basically, if you look at the examples of 08 and 12, and what's going to happen is the most centrist rhino candidate is going to get the nomination, and then the Republican rank and file are going to line up and vote for his sorry ass. And McCain would have won, except for Barack Obama had really rallied people to him as this exciting new, flavor of soda or whatever that people were just all excited about. And Romney had the fact that he was a Mormon really working against him. So I think a lot of conservatives in the South stayed home over that because they're bigots, horrible, terrible bigots.
No, of course.
But other than that, it would have been him,
Yeah, it's a very important part of the Republican Party.
So in other words, I think Jeb, even though as mediocre as he is, being that kind of centrist, moderate status quo guy makes him the shoe-in. Unless the Tasmanian devil Trump just completely upends everything.
That seems unlikely, actually. I mean,
yeah, I think so too. I think that'll be over before.
No, I mean, my sense is that Scott. I mean, look, these darn elections last too long in a way. Yeah. And nobody can pay attention for 18 months for this nonsense. So to some extent, people like Donald Trump are very important. They play a very important part, a role here in just sort of doing something interesting, because who otherwise wants to watch, an 18-month-long coronation? So you have to have these sort of diversions. To keep the media ratings up and that sort of thing. So Trump's playing a very important role. He'll eventually, of course, be sloughed aside, and that leaves, of course, Jeb. And so therefore, the whole thing is just a big waste of time. I mean, basically,
pretty much. And the Kochs are backing Walker, but the Kochs ain't nothing compared to the real establishment. They're like junior kind of, and they support conservative Republican candidates and have, but.
Why do you think that the Kochs are backing Walker? I don't
know all the details, but they've had an established relationship going back for a while now.
For a long time. But I don't know if that's going on right now. I mean, Walker has been relatively disappointing to me, actually. I mean, he's done some good in Wisconsin. Yes, he sort of evaporates into the wallpaper at some level, just because he's
and he was one of the guys who gave the answer last night that if the woman and the baby are going to die anyway, you still don't abort the baby.
No, I mean,
what?
Really? Yeah, I know. Walker is, and his answer to the God question, which again, I mean, I'm sorry you didn't hear that, but
oh yeah, me too.
But one of the Fox people actually said, or she said, does God speak directly to you, and what is he telling you? And instead of just like dismissing this as the most preposterous question you've ever heard, everybody answered it. And Walker immediately rose to the occasion and confessed his personal individual relationship with Jesus, and that Jesus speaks to him. So I mean, like,
what did Rand say?
Rand spoke about the importance of faith in his life, or something like that. It was a canned response, but nobody made fun of the question.
Quote God at least. Quote God at least.
Quote God. Let me just say something else. And look, I know you think I'm a Rand apologist, which is not true, because I was very disappointed with him last night. But he did. There was a moment last night where he brought up the surveillance state. And I don't know if you saw this.
Well, no, the questioner brought it up again, handed it to Christie and said, "You want to fight with him?" But in fact,
and Rand actually condemned the violation of the Fourth Amendment. He condemned the surveillance and showed a little bit of passion about that topic, which, given the constraints of the Fox News debate, was a little outside the paradigm. I mean, he actually that's true. Look, there were two things that happened last night that were outside the prevailing paradigm. One was Rand talking about the surveillance state. Thank you for that. I thought it was impressive. I was grateful for it. The second thing was Kasich, who gave the single most eloquent comment all night long about the question of gay marriage, and it was his statement was beautiful, almost like it was intensely personal. It was humane and lovely and honest and true in the best ways. And I've never paid any attention to this guy Kasich. I thought he was just otherwise unbearable. Yeah. But this one comment about gay marriage was lovely. I mean, what he said was, "This is I don't agree. I'm old fashioned. I don't agree with this." And then he shocked the entire audience, and he said, however, last week I went to a same-sex wedding of a dear friend of mine, and I must say I'm very happy for him, and because he's found his happiness. And if my daughter were gay, I would support her, because that's who we are. We love our family, we love our neighbors, we love our friends, we love our community, and regardless of our own views, everybody has to find their own way in life. And it was a beautiful statement.
That's it for him.
Like, right? I mean, like, okay, you know, that's not the most brilliant statement ever. However, at this parade of insane would-be dictator, fascist, brown-shirted, you know, theocratic monsters and warmongers, it was actually a moment that was humane and beautiful and lovely and plain. And actually, the audience cheered.
Right.
So
well, now, so as far as Rand goes, can you speak down just a little bit? We're getting feedback now.
I don't know how to do that.
Are your headphones not plugged in? Anymore?
Yeah.
Because everything I say to you bounces off of you and sticks to me. Oh wait, there, it stopped. It's fixed.
How about now?
You can hear me though.
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we're good.
Yeah, but now I'm getting the echo. So I'm going to switch back again. How about now? Is it bad again?
Just check. No, that's all right. I think we're okay now.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So as far as Rand goes, no, he's good on the Fourth Amendment thing, on the Patriot Act. I'm glad he fought with Christie. I wasn't watching too closely or listening too closely to exactly the argument and how it went. And I admit, like, I do have an anti-Rand bias. I really don't like the guy. I really don't. But, you know, and as just absolutely horrible as Christie is, I think Rand was actually ceding him a little bit of the high ground, just because Rand always seems, and maybe you accuse me of this right now, but he always just seems so petulant. And so, like, the way he acts and the little smirks on his face and the gestures and whatever, he just seems like such a brat to me. And he's up against, you know, Jabba the Hutt, this guy who's a former federal prosecutor, who's like the least decent man on the stage, and that's saying a lot.
You're talking about Chris Christie.
And I think that Rand, just in the way he carries himself, he just seems like such a little worm. I don't know, man. I just can't. The next thing, he ought to be blasted off into the sun for this. He came out and again outright lied in order to try to justify opposing the Iran deal. Oh, I'm for negotiations, just not this one. And my objection to it is that it lifts all the sanctions before the Iranians have to do anything. Oh, shut up. That isn't just a lie. That is the stupidest damn lie in the world. That's really what him and his staff decided was going to be his excuse. That's the one he's going to hang his hat on. He tried to say, oh, the Ayatollah even said that the deal doesn't ban them from making nuclear weapons. Yeah, it's that the rest of the sentence was, because the Ayatollah says he already banned the Iranian government from making nuclear weapons. So it wasn't the American deal, it was his fatwa. And that was why they were never making them in the first place. Stupid ass liar, Rand. And after being called on that in Congress by Kerry, he then went on Lou Dobbs and told the same damn debunked lie again. After he knew there was no way he didn't know then that he had got it wrong and was only quoting half the quote out of context. So he lied his ass off, deliberately, directly, no excuses, lied on Lou Dobbs. And then he went and again brought up his other red herring. At least he dropped that one now. But then he went and brought up his other red herring. Oh, it lifts all the sanctions before Iran is verified to have done anything, which is such a load of crap. Which is just, it couldn't even be true if that was the deal that Kerry had wanted to make, which obviously is stupid. But if that was the deal that Kerry had wanted to make, that's not actually possible in time and space, because the sanctions are, enforced by the Treasury Department and its sanctions enforcing divisions and all these things. And you can't just turn that off with a switch. They have to, there's a lot of paperwork that has to be filled out, a lot of people that have to be reassigned to different positions and whatever. It's going to take months and months to try to let the different various businesses around the world know that starting a week from Thursday, you'll be able to trade again, but now you can't yet, or whatever. All this, that can't happen in a week. That can't happen, without it being obviously simultaneous with the Iranians dismantling their program. And Rand knows that. He just, well, geez, I guess, what am I going to do? Take on Sheldon Adelson, tell the truth like my father would, And that's a really bad one. Being bad on the Iran deal is one thing. And he could have just said, well, I don't know, it wasn't good enough for me. But instead, he has to be specific and say things that are not true.
Well, I think the after the debate polls put him very, very low. And I assume, and I don't know how much we know about the elections based on where we are in all this stuff. But I assume that Rand is not going to do it. I assume that he's out, and that the only two people who really are in are Trump and Bush, and I think you're right too that Trump is not serious, right? There's no chance that he'll ever get the nomination, because people forget this, but the political process is owned by the state. It's not as if we are actually in charge of it. We pretend as if we are, but in the end, the party gets its way. So I assume that all this stuff is a distraction, but I don't think Rand is going to do it this year.
Yeah, no. And the thing is he never was, and that's fine. If only, and I'm sorry, I'm just beating a dead horse here, but if he would be honest with himself that, hey, look, in the real world, he was never going to win the nomination. But to try to make America the kind of place where maybe he could win in 8 years or 12 from now or something, maybe, how about do the right thing and lead the people? Look how much Ron changed America. I mean, Ron changed America, dude. He didn't just go from some politician to a more famous politician. Like he got, I don't have to tell you.
How do you
can tell me he turned the world upside down. And Rand, if he made half that effort, would be a great man.
It would be great. But many of the support of the constituency that was backing the outsider candidates, not just Ron, but everybody else in the last election, are now rallying behind Trump, and they don't see, for whatever reason, the ideological heritage that this person represents, which is basically a strong man representing a personal state, interested in mercantilist policies, rallying the bourgeoisie on behalf of authoritarian control of a united corporatist state. How do you account for that? I mean, these Republicans that once thought Ron Paul was just fabulous, now supporting basically the nearest thing we have to an interwar brown-shirted dictator today.
Well, because, man, they don't have a consistent real, theory. They just see him as somebody who's not from DC, who's not part of the elite, and who seems like he cares about us. Everything he says is, as you say, it's a very anti-establishment frame. And now, of course, it implies a very serious fascistic establishment to replace the one that we've got now, one much, much worse even. But they're not really thinking that through or any of that. And again, Rand is not providing the alternative. Rand, what we should be seeing right now is Rand Paul saying to the American people, the problem is empire. The problem is the national security state that keeps making us enemies and keeps us at war, keeps making our civilians targets for terrorists, breaking our bank, making the world hate us, requiring this horrible inflationary monetary system that creates the horrible boom and bust that dislocates our economy and throws all our people into poverty every few years, just as they're trying to get back up from the last time. And they're destroying our Bill of Rights and blah, 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 and get out there and fight and make the distinction. He doesn't need to attack Trump at all. He could just completely ignore Trump and focus all of his energy on Jeb Bush and the rest of the Republican Party hacks, Rubio for that matter, as being just another establishment hack. Look at his positions and go after him, man. But he doesn't. Instead, he's like, look, I'm a lot like Jeb, okay, but I'm a little bit better. So that's pretty good, right? Vote Rand.
That is exactly what's happening, and it's sad, and I don't think it's going to get him anywhere politically. Um, you know, how many more debates do we have? I hope.
Oh,
any
I don't
more,
know, a
because
million or something,
yeah,
dozens.
I've enjoyed every bit of it so far, and I'm taking a perverse. I look. This is the first time in 10 years I've been interested in politics, Scott. So, it's okay. I've,
Yeah. Hey, I'm
I've
stuck like this too, man. I can't help it.
yeah, I've ignored all this stuff up to now, and now suddenly I'm fascinated by the relationship between this political rhetoric and public opinion and the regime, especially in these. And what's remarkable, and I had an article the other day. I don't know if you saw it on fee.org that I co-authored with Max Borders, about just how dramatically the country has changed over the last 4 years. I mean, we're actually making progress in every area of life. We're seeing the invention of new technologies. We're becoming freer. In many ways, the state is less and less relevant in our lives, and less in control of the world. And things are basically I would say, going on the right track. With the exception of the central government sort of annoying us all the time, and it's a perfect time to work towards the obsolescence of the state.
Yeah.
And these elections are sort of annoying at some level, in the sense that they really do represent a kind of distraction from the work of building civilization, which seems to be happening despite the state, not because of it.
Well, and they can either reinforce the idea that, hey, this is what we're all about here, man. It's democracy. Let's all participate in it and care about it. Or it can reinforce the message that you're just given, that we really don't need these guys at all. I mean, all they call themselves our security force, but they're a $5 or $7 trillion a year monstrosity that does a million times more harm than good.
Yeah.
No matter what kind of gain you could point to for them.
I'm really
They're responsible for all the wars on the planet Earth right now.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm really at the point, and maybe it's kind of post-cynicism. I actually believe that like no good at this point can come out of the political process or out of reform from the top down. I mean, that basically we have to, if we have any hope at all, it's going to be through a gradual sort of development of an irrelevancy of the ruling class, and that all reform is going to come from the bottom.
Well, and the thing is too that we're going to have this government. We're not going to be able to get rid of it. In fact, Justin Ramondo and I were having a big fight about this, where he's always looking real hard for political heroes and wants really badly to believe in Rand Paul, for example. Where my idea is not just forget politics and forget political action in any sense, or what are any of us doing here, depending on exactly how you define politics, of course. But it seems to me like you take whatever all human rights groups suing the government to close Guantanamo or to end the drug war in various ways or whatever. Well, if we had, I don't know, 700 more of those groups doing those things, then we'd be doing that much better. And so we don't necessarily need a good judge. We don't necessarily need a good congressman or a good senator or a good president. But what we need is good people who have their priorities straight about what are the worst things our government is doing and how can we make them stop doing those things. And then it's never a matter of making them see the light. I mean, we're talking about politicians here, but they can be made to feel the heat. They can get the idea that, hey, look, there's a parade and I need to go and get in front of it. And then this doesn't require us trusting them or liking them or supporting them or voting for them. But it also doesn't necessarily mean that we just disengage and just go try to live on a commune like a hippie or whatever and just forget about it either. But it just means that, at least as far as I'm concerned, my role is, as it's a tiny little pebble in the pond, believe me, I know, but just trying to broaden the consensus that, hey, we all are sick and tired of this now, right, everybody? And just once we get many more people with a much more libertarian take, and I mean liberals who are much more libertarian than authoritarian, and conservatives who are much more libertarian than authoritarian. They do exist, and the other liberals and conservatives can be influenced to be more libertarian and less authoritarian. And we're never going to make them all libertarians like us, but we can try to influence them in a new realignment toward liberty. In other words, in my point of view, stopping the government from doing all of the very worst things that it's doing. That can all be done without, you know, trying to believe that Obama's a hero and he's going to bring us hope and change, or Rand Paul is secretly Ron Paul under there somewhere, and he's going to, once he sneaks into office, then he's going to get, you know, good and libertarian on us or whatever. We don't need to deceive ourselves. We just need to keep denouncing them and keep trying to build a consensus among, you know, our neighbors and fellow countrymen.
I completely agree.
We're sick of these guys, man. They're just parasites. You can't justify them at this point. You just can't.
That was my whole impression of the debate, was just the unreality of the entire situation. It has nothing to do with our lives in many ways. The issues they're talking about actually are not issues for us. You know, they're mostly liars, making debating points for the media. You know, I mean, the priorities of the Fox News broadcasters are not the priorities of people in their normal lives. And that's what struck me more than anything else, is just this huge chasm that exists between the political culture and the path of history. You know, they seem
well, the society, we're moving much faster than them. That's for sure.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I have like 1% left on my computer, and as I said,
oh, no.
I showed up. I mean, you can't, like, I'm the rudest person in the world, right? So I show up to a party, and I walk in the front door and I say hello to everybody. Do you? And I said to the host, "Do you have a room I can go to that can do this broadcast?" And he put me in here. So it's
for God's sake, go drink with your friends, Jeff, and let's call it a night.
Well, Scott, it's amazing to be with you. And you know, it occurs to me actually that, I mean, first of all, I adore your perspective, and I learn from you every single time I visit with you. I think you're just awesome, and I would love to. You know, meet up with you every time these kind of big public events happen, and just hash out. Because it's fascinating. You're fascinating, and
cool.
I love tracking this stuff. You know, I never understood something about Murray Rothbard at the time I knew him, which was for about 10 years, how much he loved politics, because I never had any interest in it.
Yeah.
But this year, for the first time, I feel like I've gotten the bug. So,
that's
and it may never come back. So I want to run with this while I've got it. So thank you.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a hell of a lot to criticize, man.
All the best to you, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. See you next time, man. Bye, everybody.
Bye.